Now, we've talked about Jim Quick on this show before. Most recently, we tied his California coachman, pretty much a forgotten nymph, from his book, Fishing the Nymph, published in 1960. And when I was researching that pattern, I learned of his first book, published in 1957, called Trout, Fishing, and Trout Flies. So I thought that's a pretty cool looking book. I did some digging, found a used copy of it out there, ordered it. When it came in, read a little bit of it, thought this is pretty cool, went to put it on my shelf, and then I realized I already had a copy of this book. So that's just what happens when you're a fly tying history nerd with a few hundred books. So anyway, I don't need 2 copies of this book. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but I will give one of them away. So if you're interested in it, just leave a comment, say quick anywhere in your comment. In a couple of days, I'll go to the random comment picker and find somebody to send this book to. Now, I'm not going to do a formal review on this book because it's just not for everybody. But for any of you out there who do like the history of our sport, like digging through old literature, finding some old forgotten patterns, yeah, you're going to like a book like this. I mean, anybody who ties flies wearing a necktie, I think they're pretty cool. And just like his first book, he hand drew all the illustrations in it, and he's got some pretty cool drawings in it. But this one's also got several color plates of flies in it. And a lot of the flies are patterns that we've all heard of, but there are plenty of flies in here that I'm betting nobody out there has heard of. And I'm going to do one of those for you today. The pattern is called the pot o' gold, and underneath it in parentheses, it says the rainbow fly. So that in itself, I think, makes it a fly worth remembering. Now, it's a pretty generic caddis-type pattern, but it does have a chenille butt for an egg sac, and he talks about all the different colors that you could tie this thing in, so I'm thinking it's just as much an attractor fly as it is a caddis. Now, overall, it's a really simple pattern, but I think it's just a really cool forgotten fly. So there it is in the vise, a pot o' gold from Jim Quick's 1957 Trout Fishing and Trout Flies. Pretty cool looking pattern, no tail on it, and I did see reference to it called a caddis, but I'm considering it pretty much a generic attractor fly. Certainly in these colors, I'm tying it in. So this is a size 12, which is a pretty good compromise for any attractor type fly. And I'm going to use some 70 denier thread, and I'm going with yellow because, you know, that's the body color I'm going to use. You can really use any color thread, but if you have a wide assortment of thread, pick one that's the color of the body you're going to use. Now I'm going to tie in a butt. It's going to be chenille. And the one in the picture was red, but he also said you could use a green or yellow, and just whatever color scheme you want, really. And if you're considering it an egg sac, I probably would go with a green. Okay, so I've stripped a little bit off, and I'm going to do some loose wraps to bury this bare, thread core in. Just trying to minimize a bump that I'm going to get right there. Let's take our thread right back to where we first caught it in. Okay, so what I'm going to do with the chenille, I'm going to do one wrap, maybe 1.5 behind where my thread is, and then I'm going to catch it off right there where my thread is. So I'll do 3 big open wraps right here just to give me a little room. And I'm going to wrap this up, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a mess, and we may end up having to trim it, but that's going to be okay. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go with 2 full wraps right here. And now remember, we had 3 wraps, we can back these off, and now we're right there where we want to catch it off. See, I told you that's going to be a little shaggy, but that's okay, we can trim it here shortly. So a few wraps right here. Let's take our thread up, maybe a couple eye lengths back. We're going to have a wing and a collar hackle up here. But before that, let's catch in our body material. And I'm going to do a yellow floss here. I'm catching it in up front so that I can wrap it down and back to get at least a couple of layers of floss. And this is also why I'm going with a yellow thread. So, if you had a black thread, you'd have to really put the floss on pretty thick to make sure you didn't have any thread showing through, but go ahead and wrap it all the way down and then back up. Now you see how that body is thicker toward the back? If you really care about that, we'll just take a layer halfway down and then back up again. There we go, let's catch it off now. So that body is a little bit flatter, and I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this, butt right here. And I think that's gonna be good enough. It's not perfect, but it looks okay. Now I'm gonna use some woodchuck tail. You certainly could use squirrel or groundhog, whatever you want, but this woodchuck, it's kind of a cool material. Now I'll put it in my stacker. And let's take a look at it. So this stuff is a little bit more coarser, I guess, than squirrel, but not quite as coarse as, a deer hair or an elk hair, and it's certainly not hollow like a deer hair would be. I'm gonna spin this thread clockwise, kind of cord it up a little bit. That'll help me get a tighter bite when I catch this end right here. And I don't want it laying too flat. That looks okay right there, but after I start wrapping a little bit more and put the collar hackle on, it might end up pushing it down. So what I'll do here, I'll lift this up and put at least 1, maybe 2 wraps up under it. Okay, so that'll help prop it up. Now let's just trim the excess up front. Okay, cut that as close as you can get it. Now take a few extra thread wraps just to smooth out this area where we're going to wrap the hackle. Now Quick says use a brown or a grizzly or even both. I'm just going to go with a grizzly. This isn't that big of a fly. I don't think I can get a whole lot of wraps on it up here. You don't really need it. So let's catch this one in. And you can put a wrap behind that feather if you want. If you want to prop it up, I'm not going to worry about it. Just take it up front and snip the excess. Now let's just wrap it up. And I think on this size fly, 4 wraps should probably work. Okay, I think that's 4. I'm going to go 1 more. Might start crowding my eye a little bit, but I think it'll help it be a better floater. So yeah, we're crowding that eye a little, so before we snip that off, let's just try to push everything back, take a few wraps back, make room for our whip finish. Okay, now let's just do a little bit of cleanup here. And I got a couple of fibers going forward. I'm going to snip them. Could get out my singeing tool or tweezers, try to pluck them, or just snip them and call it done. See that wing? I did end up pushing it down just a little bit, doing those wraps, but I think we still got a fishable fly, and I think this looks kind of cool. So there you go, the Pot O' Gold from Jim Quick's 1957 Trout Fishing and Trout Flies. Now I appreciate you watching, everybody. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.